When the Concord beta came out about a month ago, I really liked it. I'm a big fan of first-person PvP shooters. It's a genre that I have a lot of fun with, though that genre in general has just grown so stale, at least for me as a console gamer. For example, X-Defiant left me wicked underwhelmed, and while I know a lot of people really liked that game, for me it just felt bland. It seemed to lack originality, and I buy and play the newest Call of Duty game every single year, but the last 3 years of COD games just haven't hit for me like they used to. And then there's Valorant. That game is definitely unique in terms of its gameplay for sure, but it didn't click with me on a personal level. But I do plan on returning to that game pretty soon, actually. I reviewed the beta when the beta came out on consoles, and it just wasn't what I was expecting at all, but I want to play it again with my expectations in check, knowing what to expect, especially since the full game now came out on consoles. But anyway, back to Concord. I went into the Concord beta with wicked low expectations, and I came out practically addicted and in love. I think something I said in my beta review was that it was the most fun I had in a new PvP shooter since the great week of 2016 that saw the release of both Battlefield 1 and Titanfall 2, but that's not to say it didn't have its flaws. It certainly did. Movement felt slow and sluggish. It lacked any real innovative new game modes, but still, it felt fresh. It felt like I was playing something new, which is more than I can say for a lot of more recent first-person PvP games. But with that being said, I've often wondered to myself, in the weeks that have passed since the beta, was it all in my head? Was I delusional? Was my opinion born in the heat of the moment, fueled by passion that filled the void left by other games of this genre? But luckily, I don't have to wonder about that anymore. The full release of Concord is today, and I've been diving in deep. I've been playing it for hours and hours, and I have a lot of thoughts I want to share with you. So I'm going to jump into the review. I'm going to show you some raw gameplay, but before I do that, hit that subscribe button. I talk about video games all the time on this channel. I do day one reviews. I do other video game discussions. The next two reviews after this one is going to be for Star Wars Outlaws on August 27th, and then after that, I'm going to talk about the casting of Frank Stone on September 3rd. And then after that, I'm going to review practically every big and mid-release for the whole season. So yes, subscribe if you want to keep up. But enough with this intro, let's talk about Concord.
I'm headed there. Zap, you done so.
So let's start off with all the things I like about Concord. And if you watched my beta review, I might sound like a bit of a broken record here, but I think the strongest thing Concord has going for it is the characters that you play as. This is a hero shooter after all, so of course, I want the heroes that you play as to feel cool, to feel distinct, to feel like I'm actually playing as a different character whenever I swap them out, not just different colored gloves and a different voice actor saying the same 3 half-assed lines of dialogue. And that sounds like an obvious criteria for a hero shooter, right? For the actual heroes to feel different. You'd think so, but it seems like more and more these days games seem to do the bare minimum and making each individual character's gameplay feel distinct. More often than not, characters play and feel the same, with the same weapons and all the same stats and the same gadgets, and the only difference is their ultimate abilities, and that one character has a skin in the item shop where they have a chicken for a head. But with Concord, you can tell that the developers really tried to make sure that each character had their own presence, their own weapons, their own secondary weapons, their own gadgets, their own personalities, traversal speeds, and gameplay mechanics. For example, there's Roka. Her weapon of choice is a rocket launcher, and when you hold down the aim button, it can lock onto enemies, and she can also hover in place and then slam down on enemies for some pretty massive damage. And then there's ITZ, and she has a submachine gun with a super high rate of fire, and she can shoot a cosmic ball out of her hand and it goes flying away from her. She can then snap her finger again to teleport to where that ball goes, which can make for some really cool escape attempts. She also has a different ball of cosmic energy that jams your enemy's weapons, and if you reabsorb it when it comes back to you, it supercharges your weapon in return. But it's personalities too. Each character has some pretty great voice acting, and I really like pretty much all of the designs. They vary from your standard looking military-esque dude to a walking, talking 9-foot-tall trash can man.
Wow. If they disappoint her, I will hunt down these Freegunners and I will speak to them very sternly.
But yeah, anyway, when it comes to the heroes themselves, Concord is probably the second best in the genre, at least in my opinion, based on the games that I've played as a console gamer, behind only Overwatch, or I guess Overwatch 2 now, which, speaking of Overwatch 2, that's a game I love and I play religiously, but I'm not blind. I know that game has a lot of flaws, but I think you get my point. Blizzard, in a lot of ways, perfected the hero shooter genre with Overwatch. Despite the common online sentiment for Overwatch 2 these days, the original was beloved by a lot of people for years, and for a reason. And the fact that Concord is the closest thing I've played to truly remind me how good other hero shooters can be is a true testament to what's good about this game. But with that being said, I'm sure some of you disagree, so let me know what your favorite hero shooter is in the comments down below, because I genuinely want to love more games in this genre. But anyway, let's talk about the actual game. What's it consist of? What are the game modes? What are the actual things that you'll actually be doing in this game? The first game mode is Takedown, which is just team deathmatch. It's definitely not the best version of team deathmatch ever. I can't say that whenever the need to play TDM arises that this is the game I'll pop in, but for me, it is a useful low stakes game mode to practice the core gameplay, get comfortable with other characters that you don't typically play as. And then there's Trophy Hunt, which is this game's version of Kill Confirmed. It's essentially the same thing as Takedown, but you have to collect the deceased person's dog tags in order to actually score. And generally speaking, I'm not a big fan of Kill Confirmed style game modes. I never ever go out of my way to play them. I'll only participate if it's part of a playlist and I have to. Like I'm in the 6th grade again and I'm forced to wear a red trash bag over my head and play soccer in my jeans. But in Concord, I really like this game mode for some reason. I think it's because when it comes to hero shooters, my competitive side really starts to come through, and that added detail of collecting and denying dog tags forces you to be a bit more competitive than you would be in team deathmatch, where in COD, for example, I couldn't care less about the team-based competitiveness. I just want to turn off my brain and pull triggers whenever something moves ever so slightly. Then there's Area Control. It's your standard capture 3-zone game modes, and each zone you have captured gives you a point every 3 to 5 seconds, and the first team to reach the score limit wins. It's simple, but it's definitely my favorite game mode in this game so far, because in my opinion, it really allows this game to shine the most as a hero shooter. It requires the most amount of teamwork. So if you're a healer, you'll be doing the most healing. If you're a tank, you'll be doing the most tanking. It requires the team to stick together the most and really help each other out. There's a couple other game modes as well, some one life, no respawn style game modes. Basically this game's version of search and destroy. And full transparency, I'm not really a fan of that game mode at all, so I didn't really play it much. So I can't really speak on how it compares to that same game mode in other games. I want to talk more about the core moment-to-moment gameplay. In my opinion, if you couldn't tell already, I really like it. I know I already spoke on 2 characters in a bit of detail, but every other character really does feel different from one another. Some characters use your standard, more traditional weapons like revolvers and assault rifles, a crossbow, a giant-ass Gatling gun, sniper rifles, that sort of thing, but this is a sci-fi, so of course there's your more fantastical weaponry, pulse orbs, laser beams, a giant ring of death that works like the devil's vacuum cleaner, but the skills and gadgets vary a lot too. Some characters can turn invisible, others can teleport, some can fly, others can hover. Gadgets vary from your typical grenades and throwing knives to weird balls of energy like I mentioned before. There's also spy beacons and energy boosters that can heal your allies in mass or boost their damage. Just a whole bunch of different shit going on, and it all feels fun to do, and it feels great in your hands. And I know I said this in my beta review, I said I might sound like a broken record here, but this game has the best use of the DualSense that I've ever experienced. Every single thing you can possibly do in this game, the DualSense has a response for. From your footsteps, to when you pull the trigger, to the damage you take, to walking through a force field. It's simply amazing how good the DualSense features are in this game.
Ah, got it!
But like I mentioned, Concord isn't the second coming of Christ, resurrected in video game format. It does have a noticeable amount of flaws. And now that I've played the full release, a lot of the flaws do stick out more than they did in the beta. First off, I was really hoping there would be at least one more really cool game mode, something we didn't see in the beta, and I don't know why I was hoping for that. If they had an ace up their sleeve, they certainly would have wanted to show that off during the beta. But again, I know I said this in my beta review, but it's worth mentioning again here. But this game really needs its own original game mode, or at least a game mode that forces teams to really work as a team. I said my favorite game mode was area control because it's when the game feels the most like a true team-based hero shooter, and that is true, but this game really needed a game mode to showcase that even further, because there's clearly characters that are designed to be tanks and characters that are designed to be damage and healers. There are certain abilities that are perfect counters to other abilities, certain skills that are perfect defenses against other skills. There are characters that complement other characters in ways that have the potential to make team-based gameplay fantastic, but the game doesn't really have a way to bring out all of those aspects to their full potential. You see bits and pieces of it here and there, but it could be so much better. If this game added a true role-based, team-driven competitive game mode, I feel like the enjoyability would absolutely skyrocket. I also think there should have been ultimate abilities for the heroes. I think that's sorely missing. I think it would have been a nice cherry on top, a good seasoning for the sauce. Now let's talk about the movement in this game. Movement was one of the biggest critiques I and pretty much everybody else had with the beta. Some characters felt good enough, but a noticeable amount of characters just felt so slow and sluggish, and it really did lessen the experience. I mean, the only thing you do more than combat in a combat-centric game is move around, right? In order to throw a grenade at a dude's face or to capture an objective, you need to move, so it can really suck when movement in a game is bad, and it honestly was really bad at times in the beta, like being served your favorite meal, cooked by Gordon Ramsay himself, but he serves it to you on a toilet seat. He scavenged from an outhouse behind Taco Bell, and I'm gonna be honest with you, some characters still feel slow. Some characters are very annoying to navigate as, but in my opinion, generally speaking, the movement is far better than it was in the beta. Getting from point A to point B just feels a lot smoother, a lot slicker, and no longer a noticeable annoyance. And I have no idea if the developers tweaked movement after the beta, or if I just got used to it and therefore it's not noticeable anymore. But regardless, just be aware that the movement doesn't necessarily feel buttery smooth, but to me it feels a lot better, significantly better. And that's definitely not a bad thing. The fact that movement is this much better makes the game at least 1 to 2 points higher in my head. Another critique I know a lot of people have with Concord is the price point. It's $40, and honestly, it doesn't feel that bad to me. I buy Call of Duty every single year for $70, and it's made up of mostly reused assets, and I'm doing the same stuff I've been doing the year before and the year before that, so paying practically half the price of COD for a brand new game made of completely new assets with multiple playable characters and game modes feels kind of like a steal, at least for me, but I completely understand where people are coming from. X-Defiant is free, Valorant is free, Overwatch 2 is free, Fortnite is free, Warzone is free, so I get why people might not want to spend $40 on this game, but it's also worth noting that as of right now, the game doesn't have a battle pass or an in-game store like most free-to-play games. Now, obviously, everything I just said is my opinion. I'm aware I seem to be in the minority in terms of people who are genuinely really liking this game. It legitimately blew my mind a little bit when I released my beta review. Then I saw that most other people seem to not have much fun at all with this game. So definitely go watch some other reviews, get a more general consensus before you drop $40. But I can honestly tell you that this is, for me, the most fun I've had in a multiplayer first-person PvP shooter in a very, very, very long time. And 2024 is a very multiplayer-centric gaming year. A lot of the big games that have been coming out are multiplayer-driven games, and this is probably my favorite. But anyway, that's my brief and quick thoughts after playing the full release of Concord. Have you played it yet? If you have, let me know what you think about it in the comments down below. Whether you disagree with me a little bit, whether you disagree with me a lot, whether you agree with me, I look forward to hearing your opinion down below. Once again, consider subscribing if you haven't already. I'm going to be reviewing Star Wars Outlaws on the 27th, but in the meantime, you should check out my review for Black Myth Wukong. I'm really liking that game. But anyway, see you in the next video, and thank you for watching, especially if you watched this far.